please. Thank you. Welcome. Good morning. Welcome to the fifth EDSO, ENCS, and ENTSO-E event on cybersecurity, European energy grids in a radically changed landscape. My name is Sonja Tuig, and I'm the Secretary General of ENTSO-E. And I'm delighted to be here today and to welcome you all here in ENTSO-E, in the offices, but also online. So welcome to you all, and thank you for participating. Today, I am delighted to be joined as co-organizers of this conference by Mr. Roberto Zangrandi, who is the Secretary General of EDSO, and also to Mr. Anios Neg from ENCS, who is the Managing Director of ENCS. Welcome, Roberto, and welcome, Anios. Thank you to you both for the great support these past years. This is our fifth annual event on cybersecurity. We are, of course, very much focused today on a very important theme, which is the theme of European energy grids security in a radically changed landscape. And we are honored over the rest of today to have many distinguished speakers and experts to present their insights and perspectives during the course of the different panel discussions. These are difficult and challenging times. And for all of us working in the energy sector and cybersecurity, we know that this is one area that requires a very special attention from us all. I am sure during the course of today's discussions, there will be a sharing of knowledge and ideas which we can all take forward in ensuring we maintain and continuously develop the level of security necessary for both our sector and energy grids. So, before I hand over to Mr. Zangrandi, who is the Secretary General of EDSO, I wish you all a very successful conference today, a very successful discussion. I thank you all to join online and to participate on our discussion panels and forums on Slido. And now I hand over to Roberto for this morning's panel. Roberto.
Thank you, Sonia, or would I say Mrs. Tuhig? No, we are not on such a formal terms, but it's very kind to be formal in an event like this. Anyway, fifth time that we are handling cybersecurity, 5 years in a row. Good partnership with ENTSO-E and ENCS. Well, this is becoming a milestone in the discussion of the events and the situation of cybersecurity. First of all, let me before accompanying you through the day, let me just recap some housekeeping rules, especially for those that are following us online. Welcome, everybody. So. We would like to encourage all participants online to join us on Slido. And it is Slido, Slido.com. And you have the code number and the QR code probably on your screen in this moment to have a direct connection to that. That is your tool to put the questions. And we will be making sure that we take as many questions as possible from the audience, both present in this room and online. Please, it is essential you mention your name and affiliation when posting your questions. Some questions will be grouped because they are reputed similar, and they will be offered in a summarized way to the panelists. The recording of the event and the slides will be available on the websites respectively of ENTSO-E, E.DSO, and ENCS. And for those following from the room, to put questions, just raise your hand, but you must move and go to the table that you see on your left there. This is for enabling the right camera to have a snapshot of you while you are talking. So without further ado, then, I invite the speakers of the opening session to join me. We shall have today Paula Pigno, Deputy Director General Coordination of the Just Green Transition for the European Commission. Good morning, Paula, you're already online. Happy to see you. And Lorena Boix-Alonso is also arrived. We have been waiting until the last minute. Welcome, Lorena, and you're having your microphone set, and I ask you to join us here on the panelist area. Then we have got Evangelos Ouzounis, Head of Policy Development and Implementation Unit at ENISA, and Tahir Kapetanovic, Head of System Operation, Austrian Power Grid, Chair of System Operations Committee with ENTSO-E. Then we shall have a video featuring a few questions that Andrew Snake and myself did put to Robert Lee, the evangelist of cyber protection, and the CEO of Dragos, a cybersecurity company, and the author of a couple of important books. So, following our program, may I ask Lorena Boix-Alonso, Director for Digital Society Trust and Cybersecurity with DigiConnect, and a member of the European Commission, to take the floor and to talk to us about an extraordinary report she presented recently to the Brussels public. Please, Lorena.
Thank you very much, and let me start by apologizing for being late. It was not, it's all my fault. I had some confusion with the time I had to be here, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see Paula on the screen, and Evangelos that I know well, so I feel really at home. And I think that it's very good that you organize this conference because it's really a very, very important subject, and because I think it's a moment to be a little bit dramatic. I think that's the reality we are going through, and it's a drama that is you've mentioned the Ukrainian aggression, but I think also climate change is another drama we are going through, and both are having a huge impact on the energy sector, both of them. And at the same time, and I come from DigiConnect, so I talk about digital. That's my mantra. Digital and digitization, it's being crucial in managing these two big challenges. Of course, because it can help to optimize energy use, but also reduce bills by tailored advice. And digitization in the energy sector is not new, but it is true that, like for every sector, since COVID, there was a huge increase in digitization. We have now gone over 25.4 billion Internet of Things devices. I mean, we will be in 2030. And touching more the energy sector, more than half of households and SMEs today are equipped with smart electricity meters. So this is really the beginning of something that will go much further. And we often say that with digitization come the risks. I don't like to say that because I think that risks come with every activity of life. And when we started taking planes, there were risks. And there were risks of accidents and there were risks of attacks. And it's the same with every evolution of society. We just need to make sure that when we evolve, we take into account all aspects, including security. With, of course, the added challenge when we talk about the digitization in general and in particular of the energy sector, is that everything is connected and that there are no borders. And going back to the subject of today, which is the war of aggression in Ukraine, I think that we have seen this very well. We have, of course, pro-Russian cyber threat actors that have explicitly targeted member states. Particular, we make the link also often after the expression of solidarity with Ukraine. But also we have witnessed, and we are witnessing, and we are worried, of course, about spillover effects, which come precisely for this interconnectivity of everything. So even if something happens in Ukraine, it can have spillover effects in the European Union, and it is having. I mean, the only cyber attack that has been officially attributed to Russia. I mean, we have plenty of attacks that are done by activists that we know are supported, but really officially attributed to Russia is the attack on the Viasat satellite communications. And as you know better than me, this had spillovers in the energy sector. So this risk of a spillover is something which is particularly important. But even beyond than spillovers, we know that the energy sector itself has been targeted. We have seen a number of incidents this year, including malicious activity targeting operators in the European Union. And of course, as we know right now, a lot of attempts to disrupt the energy supply in Ukraine. Now, some people can see the glass half full or half empty. If you see it half full, you would say that, okay, the provision of critical services in this sector has not been seriously affected. Let's say it could have been worse, and it can be worse. And I want to believe that in a way, this is the result of a lot of effort that has been made in this sector to be strong on cybersecurity and in general in many sectors, and also on crisis management, where maybe we can be still even better. And when we talk about both, the type of measures you need to take to be resilient and the type of measures that you need to take to react quickly if something happens, we have in this sector, like in many others, always this dichotomy and interaction between the actions that need to be taken at horizontal level, because cybersecurity affects everything, and the measures that need to be taken more at sectorial level. And I think this is very well explained in the recently launched digitization of the energy action plan, where clearly you see how we talk about taking a systemic approach to strengthen cybersecurity of energy networks that combines both a horizontal approach that boosts the cross-sector cybersecurity framework, supplemented also by some measures that should be more targeted at energy. If you look at what we have been doing in the horizontal field, well, we have adopted by now the NIS directive, the Network and Information Security directive, that if we look at the previous version, because this is the improved version of it, energy was already among the most critical sectors. It was there, and I want to believe that the NIS cooperation group has been instrumental in facilitating this sector to have a coherent implementation and to also provide a forum of discussions that can tackle this particular sector. Now that the NIS2 is almost there, because we are about to now publish in the official journal, we see that also it's going to have an important impact in the energy sector, which of course continues to be a critical one, but we are extending the scope of application to a number of fields that affect or that are really at the core of the energy sector, like covering also electricity producers, covering also NEMOs, I love the name, the nominated electricity market operators, also operators of recharging points of electricity vehicles, district heating and cooling, and also central oil stock holding entities and hydrogen. So this is really a big, from my point of view, improvement. And you know that also we have in NIS2 clear and more harmonized cybersecurity risk management measures, so where we can take all together, all member states, coordinated risk assessment to identify where we have sectors. And also we have more in the field of crisis management created this network of called Cyclone of all the cybersecurity agencies in the European Union to coordinate in case of large-scale incident. Something important is that we are also including some provisions on supply chain, which of course is extremely important for this sector. But this is not the only piece of legislation. There's another one that we just adopted, so that we are now starting the negotiations. So NIS is done, which was for me a central piece in the legislative horizontal framework that is also going to be extremely important for the energy sector, and this is the Cyber Resilience Act. This is something that we were missing. NIS2 is covering services, a lot of critical services, but the Cyber Resilience Act is covering the cybersecurity requirements that every connected device, including software, will need to fulfill before being put in the EU market. So this, of course, is going to help ensure that every component in the supply chain is cyber secure. And this, of course, will be very relevant for devices embedded in the energy supply chain, such as smart meters or products with digital elements used in industrial control systems. So this is going to be really a key piece of legislation. We know already that it has created a lot of reactions in the international sphere because we are the first to come with this. And of course, this is going to set the standards probably globally. And let me finish also with some actions that have been taken at horizontal level that will affect the energy sector, which is crisis management. When the cyber attacks started in Ukraine, we immediately realized that this is not only potentially about whatever cyber, but that there was a real need to be all interconnected also in our cooperation. As Paula knows, we created, and also Vangelius, we created the Cyber Crisis Task Force in the Commission, where what we do, this is chaired by DG Connect and also EAS when there's an international angle, and we have ENISA, we have CERTIU, we have Europol, we have DG Home, we have, of course, DG Ener, and what we do is that we coordinate there any action that needs to be taken so that it covers also all the sectorial angles. We have also, in the context of preparedness and crisis management, as you may know, there were a number of conclusions from the Council that invited the Commission, together with the NIS Cooperation Group, to carry risk evaluation and to build risk scenarios from a cybersecurity perspective. So if something big happens, what are the sectors that are going to be most affected? And this is an exercise that we are doing now. And as you can imagine, energy is among the sectors that we are looking at more closely. I'm sure that this will be discussed, if not yet already done, on the basis of once we know what are the critical sectors, there are plenty of things that can be done to prepare those sectors. Together with ENISA, we have launched this program to finance preparedness tests with member states. So we really hope that member states will use it for energy as well, where you can do penetration testing, threat assessments to identify and be ready if something happens. So it's a way to test, are you ready if something will happen? So our wish now, and we announced in the cyber defense communication adopted just 2 weeks ago, our idea would be to do this type of risk assessment regularly and to have a cyber solidarity mechanism so that we can regularly do this stress test for, in particular, the energy sector, and we can regularly see if we are ready. This is why also there's a council recommendation that the Commission adopted, proposing the council to adopt it also, to do this type of assessments, covering all type of security, but also cybersecurity. Then, of course, now the challenge, and I will finish with this, is how to translate this into every sector and how to make sure that by doing it, we don't lose the horizontal aspects. Yeah, that is extremely important, and I know that now you are working on the network code on cybersecurity of cross-border electricity flows. It's extremely important that, and we are working together with Paula and colleagues to make sure that we don't lose the beauty of you getting advantage of a whole system that already exists, and we, in the horizontal aspect, getting advantage of all the interconnections, because we cannot deal with it alone. So this is the next challenge now, to see how we manage to build together the horizontal and the sectorial, and I'm sure we will certainly manage, and I'll leave it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I believe that the suasion ability of the Commission altogether, and in particular of DG Connect and DG Energy on this aspect will be extremely valuable. Thank you very much, and I suggest also my colleagues in the organization here to add the link to the report and the communication on the energy defense with the materials that we render available on our website. That would be very important. Thank you very much, Lorena, and let me go over to Paula Pino, Deputy Director General, Coordination of the Just and Green Energy Transition at DG Energy. Paula, you are welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Roberto, and Sonia. Good morning, everyone. Great to see you, Lorena, Vangelos, and Tahir. And thank you also. You promoted me to Deputy Director General, which I'm not. I'm a modest director as Lorena, but indeed
Always a wish.
very intensively working on electricity and gas security of supply, in particular over the past month. We are going through an energy crisis that is threatening not only our climate goals but also really our energy security and our independence. And the use by Russia of energy as a political weapon, trying to divide member states, destabilizing the EU and its economy, has had some effects. And Sonia, you referred to the topic of our meeting today, security in a radically changed landscape. And I can only confirm how radically our energy landscape has changed over the past 8 months. And let me recall here something which really should not go unnoticed. And some of you know this very, very, very well because you've been part of it, and in particular, our colleagues in ENTSO-E. Ever since the Russian war started in Ukraine, we have witnessed in many fronts the impossible turning possible, and in particular coming also to the electricity grid. As you may know, it was on the same night of the 24th of February this year, when Russia invaded Ukraine, that a test emergency synchronization of the electricity grid of Ukraine and Moldova with the EU continental grid was foreseen. It was meant to be a test, really only a test, in what would have been really a very lengthy process, which would eventually lead to the full synchronization of the two systems sometime next year. Now, this is not what happened, because coincidentally, it was in the very same night that this test took place, which meant that Ukraine had to desynchronize from the Russian electricity grid, synchronize with the EU's, and usually this would have lasted for some hours to then resynchronize with the Russian system. Now, that resynchronization with the Russian system never happened. And in fact, ever since, the Ukrainian and the Moldovan electricity grid are now synchronized totally with the EU electricity grid. This synchronization was meant at the beginning for stabilization purposes only, no commercial trading. Eventually, what we saw is that we ended up what would have sounded as science fiction only a few months ago. Ukraine, a country in the middle of war, devastated by war, started exporting electricity to the EU. This is incredible. It happened only for some weeks, unfortunately, until the destructive shellings by Russia of energy infrastructure in Ukraine, huge on the 10th of October, and then again last week, so destructive that Ukraine had to stop exporting electricity to the EU and is now actually importing. Now, for me, witnessing these developments in the course of only a few months is an absolute clear expression of the commitment of Ukraine of resilience, but also of the EU and our stakeholders to doing everything we can to support Ukraine, starting with ENTSO-E itself, which safeguarding all the safety measures and making sure that there would be no safety concerns, really made this possible together with the Commission, together with the member states. And it's really so much of a big step that we should really not underestimate the importance of these developments. Now, this also brings and emphasizes the need to ensure cybersecurity, and I'll come to that. But just before that, and in more general terms, what we're witnessing now with the current geopolitical circumstances and Russia's war in Ukraine is really a renewed priority to reduce dependence on Russian fossil fuels, and at much, much faster pace. That's where the Repower EU strategy comes in. And that's where we need to really replace Russian fossil fuel imports by energy savings, by accelerating our clean energy transition, by diversifying our supplies. And obviously, this also means a faster electrification of the overall EU energy system. That's what we are going through in a much faster pace than what was foreseen even under the European Green Deal. So this means the electricity sector in the EU is undergoing a profound transformation, characterized by more and more decentralized markets with more players, with a higher share of energy from renewable sources, and clearly a more digitalized and more interconnected system. Now, in this context, new challenges and also new dependence arise, and therefore we need to manage the risks that these challenges bring and guarantee the security and resilience of the electricity sector. We have a regulatory framework which already sets the basis to ensure that all member states have the appropriate tools to prevent and prepare for possible electricity crisis, that they do so in cooperation with each other and in a spirit of solidarity, of transparency. And it's really in that sense that we are working to be able to react to any possible development in the short term as we head towards winter, but also more structurally in the medium, in the longer term. And this brings us to cybersecurity. Now, Lorena said it already, and if there's one good thing is about all of this, we were brought to work much more closely together. That's a personal positive element of it. But clearly, we knew already, as Lorena said, the energy infrastructure is the most critical infrastructure, as other types of infrastructure depend on it. It's also what we are now seeing in Ukraine, and it's by no coincidence that it's the energy infrastructure in Ukraine that is being targeted so heavily. And this is also what the sabotage of the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 earlier this year reminded us of. Now, digitalizing the energy system can really deliver a strong contribution to energy security and at the same time to the climate goals, by making the whole system more efficient, more flexible, more resilient. But it brings new challenges, as said, related to the cybersecurity of our energy infrastructure and the reliance of its electricity grid. And therefore, we're really looking at cybersecurity more than ever as a key horizontal requirement for a secure energy system. We know that by decentralizing, digitalizing the production and consumption of energy, we are increasing the possible attack surface of the entire energy system. So we need to tackle actively those risks, and that's what we are doing with colleagues in DG Connect and across the Commission. Lorena mentioned we have the NIS2 directive, the Directive on Security of Network and Information System, which is about enhancing the resilience and cybersecurity of the energy infrastructure on electricity, on district heating, on oil, on gas, on hydrogen. And we published last 18th of October, a digitalization of the Energy Action Plan, which contains measures across the energy system that will help unlock the potential behind the digitalization of the energy sector, while at the same time also identifying the measures that need to be further taken on top of these to ensure that cybersecurity is tackled, is ensured. And specifically for the electricity subsector, we are working currently on the network code on sector-specific rules for cybersecurity aspects of cross-border electricity flows. This is required in the electricity regulation, and it will include rules on risk assessment, on minimum common requirements, on planning, monitoring, reporting, and indeed also on crisis management. We will have today a panel discussion dedicated to this network code, and you will be able to hear more about it. So clearly, cybersecurity is key, not only in the electricity sector, but for all the energy infrastructure, which is, as we said, critical. And it's a subject which will keep us as busy. We are well aware of that. And again, thank you to everyone, and also ENTSO-E for all the work going into it, and for the incredible transformation to this radical changed landscape that we've been witnessing over the past month, and that we have been able to counter and to shape actively by accelerating issues that usually would have taken so long in a safe manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paola, for your keynote on the strategic impact on the European energy grids and the EU vision following the war in Ukraine. E.DSO, as you know, representing the largest DSOs as well, is very well present in Ukraine, and we activated a chain of concrete help for the Ukrainian largest DSO, allowing to the possible extent a good degree of resilience, especially in the first phases of the conflict. Thank you very much, and I will go over to Evangelos Zouzounis, Head of Policy Development and Implementation Unit at ENISA. Welcome, Evangelios. But first of all, we have a question from the public, and who are the contacts in the speaker community to talk about facilitating a concept of cyber defense ranges. So, Matthias from Germany, your question is very timely, is very concrete. It comes as a first question. This guy is one of the guys you should write a mail and make a little bit more clear what you mean in promoting the experience of the EDA project beyond the military domain. I trust that between ENISA, EE-ISAC, and ENCS, they will lend you more than 1 year, and they will be happy to have a talk with you. So this was the answer, and now, Evangelios, you are on.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I thank you very much for inviting me, E.DSO, ENTSO-E, and ENCS. Partners that we collaborate for quite some time now, and we all understand that energy is definitely a very important critical infrastructure, and as Paula and Lorena very nicely explained, it is an infrastructure that other critical infrastructures depend on. So, and the recent cases, you know, in Ukraine demonstrate its importance. So we know this since long, and unfortunately, we have to experience it. We find ourselves now in a critical moment where this critical infrastructure actually digitalizes itself, becoming more efficient, becoming more creative, more innovative, offering new services. We also find this infrastructure in a profound restructuring, trying to integrate renewable sources and offering not one-way electricity but bi-directional electricity, allowing people, entities, organizations to contribute in the production of the energy, say, through solar panels and the solar technology, or wind technology and renewable sources. But as Lorena very nicely explained, this actually creates some additional risks coming from the ICT environment that is being integrated in a very safe and a very secure and a very resilient electricity world. So now these two environments have to somehow cooperate, have to somehow harmonize and deliver the service without any disruptions. So this is the typical flow, the typical evolution that we were expecting to happen. And then suddenly something unexpected, unthinkable happens, like this war in Ukraine, and suddenly we realize that we have maybe to rethink, reprioritize, refocus, maybe do other things like crisis management and leave others behind. So I'll try to explain a little bit, how ENISA has contributed to all this. And some of them have been already mentioned by Lorena and Paula. So from the day one of the war in Ukraine, the Commission showed amazing leadership. And you know very well, lots of examples have been given here. And ENISA, as an agency of the Union, definitely, were there to support our political establishment, the policymakers, and the people who were actually there, to demonstrate solidarity to the Ukraine. And we still do that. We still collaborate with ENTSO-E and other authorities to understand what is the level of the threat, or what are the imminent threats. We are very proud to say that, the level of preparedness and the level of commitment from the European electricity operators was very high. They all, immediately engaged. They all showed also leadership. They were actually activated preparedness plans. They had enough knowledge and expertise to deal with a crisis like this. Yes, for sure, that is also a learning point for all of us to see where we are not very mature and what we can do. But definitely one thing that we can take out of this crisis is that we come much, much closer. Definitely we realize that we are fairly prepared and fairly, ready. And we also identified some weaknesses that we can address. And I think the Commission immediately, took action to address some of these issues. Like, for example, offering a program for helping the member states to improve their preparedness, having more penetration tests, allowing entities to help operators, for example, to deal with incidents and so on. The second observation from my side is that luckily during this period there weren't any serious cases, nothing very, very serious in terms of disruptions, availability of service and so on. Although we were very well prepared, we haven't actually seen a very big challenge, but doesn't actually can get guarantee us that this will continue in the coming months or in the coming years. So what we can say for the electricity sector at the moment is that there are some typical threats, that are affecting the sector, and definitely we have to address them. Things that, social engineering, malware attacks, things which are also relate to the continuity of the service and so on. So, but these are business as usual, and the community knows them and works on this. The third important message is that as we come closer together, we realize some of the elements that are need some improvement. And definitely, testing our contingency plans, upgrading them, understanding the importance of information sharing, coming together and sharing information, so that we can see what are the problems, how we can collaborate, and somehow developing at the EU level or regional level crisis mechanisms, a governance, to deal with this crisis are basically one of the observations, that we all come across. And for that reason, an entity that was already mentioned by Lorena, Cyclone, was actually activated since day one, that deals with a crisis. Entities of the European Union, national entities as well, actually were monitoring the situation, and ESA was there as well. So crisis management is definitely an area where we have done a lot of progress over these months, but I personally believe that we can do definitely much more. Second observation is, we have some long-lasting challenges here. The integration of IT and OT technology gives us a headache. It is still a big challenge for a lot of electricity operators, to have a holistic risk management approach to deal with these risks. We still have a big shortage of talents, of people that can deal with IT and OT cybersecurity challenges. You cannot find these people easily in the market. They do not exist. And even if we do our best to educate, to offer trainings, to give the opportunity to a lot of young people basically to catch up, we immediately realize that there is a lot of mobility in this sector. I mean, people leave and go to other companies, and because of the pandemic and the ability to telework everywhere, we have seen actually a lot of problems, disruptions, with the availability of talented people, of skills, and so on. And the information sharing is something that, in my opinion, we have to reflect upon. How we share information, how we understand each other, what kind of sources we use to share the information is definitely an entity that I believe can help us to deal with such kind of situations in the future better. And through the information sharing, we might be able, to have a more integrated situational awareness picture. Something that, Lorena very well, we tried, and Paul as well, we tried the first months. We had to improvise, we had to be very creative, very innovative. But in my opinion, this is an area where absolutely we can do better. And closing, I think it is mentioned already, there are a lot of policy gaps that we have to reflect upon. We have a very good, solid horizontal framework, the NIS Directive 1, and now the NIS Directive 2. We have a vertical environment, the energy, the electricity, that has its own particularities. The interplay between the two is very important, not only at the policy level, but also at the implementation level. So how the national authorities, the regulators, the cybersecurity entities collaborate to make this harmonization, this interplay possible is absolutely important. And this is definitely something that we at ENISA are looking forward, to see this growing. We have seen a huge leadership commitment from DGNR to proceed in this direction with the electricity code. That is, in my opinion, one of the strongest, let's say, bold initiatives in this area. And I believe that through the electricity code, a lot of important elements are going to be addressed. We are also very happy to see a growing and a more important role of ACER that contributes to the equation of the cybersecurity as well. So we see all the players coming together, to understand their responsibilities. And this is, in my opinion, a blueprint for other areas, maybe for gas or even for sectors outside of the energy, maybe transportation and so on. So we look forward, to collaborate with, obviously, with DigiConnect, who is our parent DG, but obviously DGNR and ACER and others, in making this vision possible. And I would like to close with this and allow some time, for questions. So thank you again.
So thank you very much, Evangelos. The numbers on my timer here turned red. They will become purple in a while, but we have still Tahir Kapetanovic head of system operation at the Austrian power grid, but especially the chair of System Operations Committee at ENTSO-E. Tahir, you have the floor, and we are looking forward to you to very much integrate what has been said so far and the alerts that have been brought by Lorena, Paula, and Evangelos here. And maybe a final comment also on top of what you're going to say on the talent retention and the talent mobility that we all experience in these days. So please, you have the floor here.
Thank you. Also very nice good morning from my side. What has changed on 24th of February? Well, nothing. Nothing in our focus on security, on cyber and system security, in our competences and commitments. And everything, absolutely everything in our perception, in our thinking, in our working on and around the topics of system and cybersecurity. You see, we bind them very closely together because they are together. The extension of ENTSO-E continental European grid with Ukraine has been a project running since 2017 already. It is just that under 16th of March, we squeezed 1 year of work into 2 weeks. And this was even sufficient for our cybersecurity specialists to establish a fit for purpose, I would say excellent solution, which has so far held to stand against all odds. I won't tell you the details, I should not, but Gianluca will later now give you some insight into the key ingredients which enabled us to master this really one of the most serious cybersecurity challenges in our history. Now, maybe to be a little bit more from a helicopter view, we've heard words crisis management and resilience several times today. But I think it's worthwhile to recall that we are living crisis management for years now already. There was a global pandemic since the end of 2019. It's still there. The year 2021 was the most challenging in the history of ENTSO-E in terms of serious transmission system incidents, separations, and so on, which we still managed to deal with in an almost perfect way. And now we have the war on our continent, in our neighborhood, in our friendly neighborhood, I would say. I can tell you that at present, one of the key areas of DSOs and DSOs work is collecting equipment, IT, and power system equipment, talking about logistics, having expert teams, having a single point of contacts in neighboring countries, etc., to organize resupplying our Ukrainian friends with means to repair their badly managed systems. But we do all this with unprecedented awareness and measures concerning cybersecurity, even talking in Teams meetings, even exchanging information and so on, but especially, of course, considering the very sensitive information on system operation. I mean, this way we manage this crisis, the way we together manage system resilience and integrity together with Ukrainian colleagues, again, who do this from the battlefield, virtually from the battlefield. We have daily or weekly meetings with my colleagues from system operation who talk with us from atomic bomb shelters, from shelters from the bombs. This way we manage this together gives us a ground for the confidence in our capability to turn these threats, to turn these challenges into real assets and opportunity for European energy future. Allow me to come to a conclusion of this very short expose with another key element of the presently changed landscape, and this is an inevitable and rapidly speeding up development and integration of renewable energy. Renewable energy as the key platform for European energy sustainability and strategic security, if I may use this wording, strategic security. This is accompanied with necessary speeding up for procedures for infrastructure development. We are fully confident to meet the expectations, and if I may say so, also rights of all European citizens. We are confident and proud of our common TSO and DSO competence, commitment, but we are also honored with our Ukrainian colleagues' competence and professionals, which are really amazing. The Cybersecurity Network Code, which you've heard us, it's just about to start, or it's already in the implementation, is one of the products of this cooperation, and this is an example of what we can achieve together. With Europe united as we are today, I'm personally absolutely confident that we will eventually overcome all these threats and really huge challenges. And we will facilitate together a better energy future for our continent. This way, it will not be simpler, it will not be easy, but we will master it in the best way, just as we did it in the past months. Thank you. I'll try to be very short to leave some minutes at last for questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. We still have a video to come, and there are a few questions that Andrew Snake put to Robert Lee, founder and CEO of Dragos, and cybersecurity evangelist. Be ready for a total change of accent here. We shift from Brussels English to pure American, so concentrated. But what Robert told Andrews and myself during the interview is worth listening. Please. It is a pleasure and an honor having you delivering a keynote here in a form of interview. And we leave to Andrew Snake. He will conduct the Q&A with you. And thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.
So Rob, to start, in recent weeks, we have seen that Russia is specifically targeting the energy infrastructure in Ukraine with missile and drone strikes. Yet, there have been no reports of large-scale, sophisticated cyber attacks on the energy infrastructure. Why do you think this is the case, and what can we expect going forward?
Yeah, well, I would say that I think the reporting, or the lack of reporting is the key emphasis there. There's definitely a lot of cyber activity taking place, but I do think the Ukrainians are doing a phenomenal job. But I also think that not a lot of insights are coming out of the region because rightfully the focus is being put on people getting shot at, right? Anytime you actually have a military conflict where there's kinetic effects, that's the focus. People's lives are the focus far more over any of the cyber piece. I think as time progresses, we will find out a lot more that's been happening there. And we've seen groups that have been associated with the Russian government targeting and doing reconnaissance of electric infrastructure across Europe as well as the United States during this time period. So it's very clear that they're active. It's just not quite as clear as what are the effects today in Ukraine.
And Russia is attempting to cause power shortages in Europe by reducing gas deliveries. And there has been physical sabotage to the gas infrastructure on the Nord Stream pipeline. How do you rate the likelihood of cyber attacks on the European energy infrastructure? And are there any signs of increased threat activity?
Yeah, unfortunately, you never want to fearmonger, right? And you can't predict the future, but unfortunately, all the signs are there, right? All the warning signs are blinking. For one, we've also had good intelligence agencies like NSM, as an example, come out and advertise that they do think that there will be an increase in cyber activity, especially this winter, putting pressure on some of these providers. As you look at trying to put pressure on the European electric system by reducing natural gas, well, there are some pretty major providers like Equinor, Gasco, and others, especially in the Nordic countries, that are providing sort of that relief. And so I think there's a lot of concern about cyber for those companies and similar companies around November timeframe. Our firm started seeing a wide variety of proper reconnaissance. So what I mean by that is not like scanning an electric company, but going for the exact right transmission sites, going for the right generation sites, going for the right liquid natural gas sites by groups that the US government has come out and attributed to Russia before. And those groups were doing that type of reconnaissance. And we were quite concerned about it, briefed the United States government folks and started putting a little extra attention on what we were seeing, eventually leading to a discovery that was pretty significant that I think hasn't got a lot of attention. And that was the discovery of a capability we called PipeDream. PipeDream is a malicious software that is explicitly designed to be able to be cross-industry, scalable, and disruptive. And we'd never seen anything like that before. Even with the Ukraine power outages, it was really against transmission or it was against distribution. Couldn't go generation, distribution, transmission. It couldn't go pipeline. It couldn't go manufacturing facility. But PipeDream has the ability to be disruptive cross industries and repeatable. Luckily, Dragos, the National Security Agency, and the Department of Energy were able to kind of get ahead of it, but that doesn't stop it. It's not like a vulnerability you just fix. It's a weaponizing of native functionality in those environments. So long worded short for everybody is there was already reconnaissance and then capability development that is absolutely able to disrupt power. We just have not seen it employed against its targets. So we know that an adversary has the intent and the opportunity and the capability. Then it's just a matter of timing.
And where should we assume the highest risk for cyber attacks on the grids to happen?
Yeah, right now, every bit of messaging we've seen, if we're explicitly talking about Russia, has been around liquid natural gas. So as you're talking about LNG import facilities, you're talking about LNG floating terminals, as you're talking about combined cycle generation sites that are using liquid natural gas from a generation capacity, those are going to be pretty high on the list just because of the messaging. However, if we look at capability, we have consistently seen the transmission side of the house be far more I should say battle tested. There's been a lot more attempts against it. So if you're looking at the human expertise that adversaries may have, it's pretty high on their list to be able to target electric transmission. They feel comfortable in being able to do that. And we have a lot of commonalities in those energy management systems that they rely on. IEC 104, 61850, the various protocols are kind of open and understood. The equipment is understood. It's a more ripe target as a result.
Could a sabotage act like we've seen in the Nord Stream pipeline happen through a cyber attack?
Yes, not to the exact measure. So if you study what actually happened in Nord Stream, it's very clear it was kinetic and physical sabotage. Could you accomplish similar type of outcomes through cyber? Absolutely. There's stories that has happened before that I think are not accurate. People talk about the BTC pipeline explosion in Turkey. They talk about the Siberian pipeline explosion back in, I think, the 80s or 70s. Neither one of those are credible. However, we have absolutely seen physical effects being accomplished through cyber to include destructive and long-term sabotage. 2014 in Germany, there was a steel mill where the physical destructive event on a blast furnace sabotage, it was through cyber. We've seen tampering with chemicals in a water system in Oldsmar, Florida, to be able to try to hurt people. You've seen electric transmission sites come down across Ukraine before. Can you cause sabotage? Yes. Even in Ukraine in the 2016 attack, I still think it was relatively misunderstood. Yes, it caused a power outage, but what the adversary was actually trying to do was to achieve a kinetic effect by the way that you would interact with the reclosers on the transmission system. Long story short, when we think about cybersecurity, so many people put focus on prevention. You really need to have detection and response as well if you're going to get root cause analysis and actually understand what happened. And the adversaries were essentially taking advantage of the fact that people don't have that visibility, don't have that detective and responsive capability, and the operators were going to go back and reconnect the electric system under load, not realizing it was under load because the protection schema was down in the relays. So you really need to be able to get root cause analysis, not just prevent attacks if you're going to recover to them correctly.
And you already started to touch upon it, but how should we prepare going forward and what should be our priorities?
Yeah, I would, number one, not copy enterprise IT security into our operations sites. I've responded to more power outages from well-intentioned IT people than I have Russia, China, Iran combined. Okay, we need to be thoughtful about the security that we put into our operations environments. And that needs to be risk-based. What have we actually seen before? If you're preparing for a scenario where the United States, Russia, and Iran team up and come at you, that's not a realistic scenario. It's never happened before. Okay, so I'm not saying never think about it. It's just, it's not happened. It's not appropriate to build into our system and have our consumers pay the fees and the rates for things that aren't real risks. But Ukraine 2015 scenario, Ukraine 2016 scenario, ransomware across operations, pipe dream, those are four things that have absolutely happened. And if you're not prepared against them, you're probably pretty far behind. But to prepare against those scenarios is not antivirus and patching, because actually antivirus and patching wouldn't have helped in any of those scenarios. But it's more along the lines of defensible architecture, an industrial specific incident response plan, getting visibility and being able to detect the tradecraft, the methods of the adversaries we've seen before. So there's only a couple things you really have to do, but you've got to do them well. And I will tell you, in a lot of the incident response cases we take, probably the top two findings is, number one, the data you needed to answer your questions, whether it's regulatory, operations, financial, whatever, was not collected ahead of time. So there's nothing you can do. I mean, if it's not collected before the attack, you're not going to be able to get it. And number two is the executive staff had a much rosier view of the current status of their operations technology or OT security than reality. And so we really need to pick a couple of things to do, implement it completely across our environments, implement it correctly, to be able to communicate and operationalize it before trying to go and play, bingo, hitting a bunch of standards and frameworks with all these different scattered technologies. If you're looking for specifics, the SANS Institute published a paper titled The 5 Critical Controls for Industrial Control System Cybersecurity. I would start with those 5.
All right, thank you. Then to wrap it up, if you had one question for the panels following this presentation of yours, what would that be?
Yeah, as we look to the security panels and the ones related to it, I would simply ask them if their advice is explicitly to real world scenarios we've seen. Because a lot of times we get really excited about our guidance and we don't really tailor it to the risk that we're talking to. So as you give advice, as you talk to these folks, is this something that's actually grounded in reality of what we've seen before in our industry? Yes or no? For the ones that are not security related, I would simply ask, especially for the executives, if you had a disruptive event, if you had a portion of your electric system go down, do you have the confidence that you have the people, process, and technology to actually understand, was it sabotage? Was it cyber? Was it a misoperation? Being able to get root cause analysis is one of the most difficult things, and most companies are simply not prepared for that.
All right. And thank you very much for your helpful insights. Roberto, you want to close?
Yes, thank you very much. It was extremely clear, and I think inspirational for our public here today. One last question. What do you fear the most in terms of energy cybersecurity weaknesses?
Yeah, honestly, it's the misapplication of security. If we go down the route of understanding this is a problem, this is a community that can fix it. Our engineering and operations and electric providers, they're amazing. We have safe, reliable systems because of the amazing work they've done. So I've got all the confidence in the world they can do it. But if we don't get aligned to what the actual scenarios are that we should care about, we could very quickly put cost onto the system that hurts our consumers, that doesn't actually reduce a lot of risk. I fear our misaction more than adversary action.
Thank you very much, Rob. That was great. And hope to have you here repeatedly during our next editions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcos, for organizing this. It was recorded some 12 days ago, so it is before the last massive attack to the Ukrainian infrastructure by the Russian, but the content is quite clear and goes along what we have said so far. So cyber resilience on one side, the lack of an holistic approach, inaction as a big risk. And Lorena, you had a comment on this.
Well, I was asked a question, so I would like to, to reply, because it was a very good question. Yeah. Are we just simply adopting resilience measures, or are we basically trying to do something about the risk scenarios that could be there? And as I was saying in my opening, this is something we are doing right now as we talk, together with all the 27 member states and with the help of ENISA as well. It's precisely to design risk scenarios. And one of the sectors that we are covering is the energy sector. So this is, right now as we talk, we are preparing together with member states questionnaires that will need to be replied by the relevant entities in member states to draw the scenarios. And from there, we will have whether recommended actions are even also, as we were saying before, to do a number of preparedness actions on the basis of risk scenarios. And what we would like right now is to make this on a regular basis, so that this is not just because there is the Ukrainian aggression. Yeah. I wanted to react also to one of the questions in the on the screen, which is what are we doing to exchange info about the threat landscape? And I wanted to mention, because you are looking at me like the resilience person, in the Commission we do a lot on crisis management as well. And we do a lot also on threat analysis. It's nice that you invite a US person to comment on that, but you have also Europeans. Right now, one of the projects we are working on is to interconnect SOCs at EU level. So security operating centers in the public field, but fed by also sectorial info. We are about to launch a call for expression of interest to allow all those member states that want to cooperate among each other to exchange threat info. And we are going to finance also common infrastructure for that, including artificial intelligence tools to not only have the data, but to play with the data, which is, of course, extremely important. This is a huge project on which we are about to launch in the coming days, so that it was announced some days ago in the cyber defense communication. And there was another question on commands, cyber commands in the military. Also, we are launching the cyber solidarity mechanism that is trying to involve and coordinate the private sector as well, in case there is a big issue. How are we going to coordinate? Can we reserve capacities from the private sector? As we see in Ukraine, 90% of the support comes from the private sector. But of course, if something very, very, very big happens, we will need to coordinate and organize all these. But okay, we are well beyond the time. We could have focused on that as well.
Absolutely.
Happy to do it at another occasion. Thank you.
There was another couple of questions, but in just one nutshell, it is something that we want to emphasize to Tahir Kapetanovic. There was a question about using cloud to monitor the threat and as a safeguard to possible cyber threat to the critical infrastructure. What is your monosyllabus answer to these?
I mentioned that Gianluca will give you some general ingredients.
Yeah.
I won't talk about too many details here because it's kind of large conference. Yeah. Yes, we do. It's a nice answer.
That's it.
And it's certainly the future. What I'm told by my cybersecurity experts when I raise this question, is it safe? Moving to the cloud, everything goes to the cloud, even our office. Fortunately, at the moment, not yet. The operational data, I believe they will also stay separated. So I have to trust the experts which say that it's safe. I wouldn't go further on. I think in a later presentation by Gianluca, you will get a little bit like a general view, not just on the cloud technology and so on, but also on our overall policies and maybe some 3 or 4 key pillars for the future. I'll finish here. I think it's enough.
Thank you very much. We are almost 10 minutes long. May I invite the present public to go for a very quick coffee break, and we shall come back in 5-7 minutes maximum for the value of the grids. So what the cyber attacks and strategies do in compromising the European grid. And please stay with us, those on the line, and it will take no longer than 7 minutes. Thank you very much, Paola Pino on the screen. Thank you very much, Tahir on the screen. Thank you very much, Lorena and Evangelos with us today. In 5 minutes, 7 minutes, we are back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much and goodbye. You have to leave now. Thank you.
Surround myself with soldiers on a similar mission. Subtract and addition. Rappers at a high rate. Exercise all these chin niggas. Why wait? Frustrate the industry's thirst. Cause we burst brain vessels of their favorite rappers off to the hearse they're sent. With fake dreams of how they represent. Next time gotta get the sucker to present. Mind over matter. Facts on a platter. Life get difficult, your whole frame shatter. Push aside the BS. tried to harm me. That's when I represent war. A law made laws, so I don't give a damn about yours. I'll open up your mind like pause with the 4-4. And Beirut, pack a 5 plus 4 more. The truth is what we live and die for. Something that we kill for and cry for. Something we pray for every day 5 times. Cause none of your cats got 9 lives. You see the world through blind eyes. So when you're searching for the truth, you only find lies. The truth is the bike is insane. Now like an architect, gotta know mathematics. A scientist, the disposition of static. I melt mics without illusions or magic. So who you wanna call when shit get drastic? Dope on plastic, prepared for the casket. Pike is tight like holding water in wicker baskets. No drips, no leaks. And who's better with the tide bleak over street beat? Your function ain't functioning until you cross fade the pike like Broadway Junction. And the verdict is in. We smiting the necks of all suckers with these fake ass grins. While I run with no intention to win. Nowhere near the end, let's prepare, let's begin. Nowhere near the end, let's prepare, let's begin. Nowhere near the end, let's prepare. Yo, mind over matter, facts on the platter. Chop them down like home run batters. Push aside the BS, what's left always the same. The truth. Yo, mind over matter, facts on the platter. Life get difficult, your whole frame shatter. Push aside the BS, what's left always the same. The truth will remain. Yes, that's got his own. 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 Yes. Yes, that's got his own. 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 God bless the child. Got his own. Papa may have, but that's got his own. Yes, that's got his own. Yes, that's got his own. Yes, that's got his own. Empty pockets don't. Empty pockets don't. While the weak ones say yes. Yes, that's got his own. 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 Yes. Empty pockets don't. Empty pockets don't. While the weak ones say yes, that's got his own. Yes, that's got his own. Yes, that's got his own. Yes, that's got his own.
We are back to the Cybersecurity 2022 organized by E.DSO, ENTSO-E, and ENCS. I hand over for the moderation of the next panel to Ivan Štefek. And Ivan is Chief Information Security Officer at the SHEPS, the Czech TSO, and the steering group ICT Security, Convenor at ENTSO-E. Please, you can start and moderate your panel.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm happy to be here as the moderator of the panel discussion, Cyber Attacks and Strategies Compromising the European Grids. And I would like to welcome here also my colleagues. On my left hand is Anios Nik. Anios is managing director in ENCS, and he's also observer in steering committee of the Smart Grids Task Force of European Commission, and also is in he is connected with European Association E.DSO and ENTSO-E. Next to him is Jean-François Montagne. Jean-François is Chief Information Security Officer in ENEDIS, which is France DSO, and he is also contributed as a DSO expert to the first draft of network code for cybersecurity in 2020. On his left is Grzegorz Bojar, which is Chief Information Officer in PSE, which is Polish TSO, and Grzegorz is also member of ICT committee under the ENTSO-E, which is the main body for information technologies in ENTSO-E. And last but not least, Aurelio Blanquet, Secretary General of ISAC. Aurelio is also the member of organization like EUTC, European Utilities Telecom Council, and WEF, World Economic Forum. So, welcome, gentlemen. Few minutes ago, before the coffee break, Tahar Kapitanovic mentioned that 24th of February, nothing changed from the cybersecurity perspective, as cybersecurity is important for us and as we perceive it. I agree with it, but what changed, and from my point of view dramatically, is the number of cybersecurity attacks, number of phishing campaigns, number of E.DSO attacks, number of at least scans of infrastructure from the external environment. So this is what was changed, and that is also the part of my first question to gentlemen. We have two gentlemen here from the let's say TSO-DSO part, and two gentlemen from the European organization part. So first I would like to ask the Grzegorz and Jean-François how they think that the attacks changed, if the strategies and cyber attacks change after 24th of February, and how they are prepared for the attacks, if they change something in his mind, or what they think about it.
Okay, that is quite complex question, in fact.
It is, but we have
because
one hour.
The story is long. In the first phase, after I agree with Tahir, nothing has changed in approach from TSOs and DSOs or energy sector as a whole. We were doing those things with high priority. We are doing those things, and in a strategy, nothing has changed. But the situation has changed, and in the first phase, after 24th of February, I would say that even those attackers, state attackers, were not very well organized. They even lost a little bit focus, and they were organizing themselves again, because some groups were mixed between countries and so on, and the political situation has changed, so they had to reorganize themselves, and they were strictly organized themselves under, let's say, one state, and they started to do different vectors of attacking. The simpler vector is DDoS, that's true, and that was the second phase. It was a development of the solutions, and they started to use massively DDoS, not usually very huge, but massively on many countries, especially in Ukraine, but in fact on every European country, and they were searching for targets, for weak targets to attack. And second, some much more professional guys from, let's say, state agencies. We know even the names, we know the photos, we know who are they, and what are the capabilities are. But there are strong capabilities by them. They started to try attacking industrial infrastructure, especially energy infrastructure. They modified their code, they made it simpler, newer, and they tried at least once on Ukraine infrastructure the attack called E.DSO. And that was unsuccessful because Ukrainians were quite well prepared and secured. But we are still afraid that they will use this technique again and again, modifying it each time on other infrastructures. But in fact, European energy sector, in my opinion, is quite well protected and quite well prepared. And as Tahir said, we treat it seriously in every country. Of course, some accidents can happen because you are not able at that mess of systems, solutions, controllers, whatever, to keep. It is simply impossible to keep everything at the highest level. So some accidents will happen, but I am not expecting myself some dramatical threat and dramatical disaster in cybersecurity in European, especially electro energy sector. Sorry, that's so long.
Please, my pleasure. Indeed, you said a lot about the situation. Well, surprisingly, we were quite afraid when the conflict burst about spillover effect. We spoke a lot about spillover effect, and we talked a lot about it between CSIRTs in Europe, but also in France with the big energy decisions, big utilities, and no real concrete attack were observed from the beginning of the conflict. But for sure, as you said, there was an intensification of the attempts, either on the basic side of the cyber attacks like DDoS or kind of ransomware wipers, so that are wiping every data. Spear phishing, of course, phishing campaigns are a key element to start attacks through social engineering and privilege acquisitions. But so far, we haven't seen this coming into our domain, our perimeter. I would say we are indeed currently most afraid as a DSO, by cyber criminals and attempts to
to take advantage of a ransomware because it strikes everywhere, no matter the industry, the business. So it's business agnostic, I could say. And regarding the specific attack that you mentioned, like Industrial, who was discovered in April, and 8th of April, this was the very prepared aggression, but as Ukraine had already faced this kind of attacks 5 or 2 to 6 years before, they were much more prepared, and thanks to this, it couldn't brought a blackout, a massive blackout in the company. I think this requires a lot of preparation. So high malware technology plus a good preparation to access to configuration data, to strategic data that are needed in order to the attack to succeed. And that's why maybe it would be a very big effort for cyber criminals, I would say, at state level, and the consequences would be so massive, so dramatic, like a blackout, a lasting blackout, that we wouldn't be the only ones affected, and it would affect the European grid or national level, at least at national level, and then it would become a kind of act of war. So I think before this occurs and this happens, there will be some preparatory discussion and probably anticipation of this kind of massive attack. So, and we count not only on our common action to anticipate, to detect, and to recover, but also on the national security agencies that are also doing a fantastic job to protect us.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was the opinion from the operator's side, and now I would like to ask Anios and Aurelio, what do you think from your perspective? Your organizations are focusing on cybersecurity education and information sharing. Do you think, or can you see there some different requirements from the operator side? Can you see there some changes, or it is almost the same as before? What do you think?
Yeah, maybe you can start to give a broader perspective from ENCS. And so what we see is that hacker groups related to nation states have demonstrated proven skills to cause blackouts. Nation state actors are building capability. Attack software dedicated to grid technology exists and seems to become more sophisticated. But we do not know exactly what their capabilities are. Malware has been discovered in multiple grids in Europe and throughout the world. And it's very hard to distinguish criminal activity from early stage advanced persistent threats by nation-state actors, as you only know if they are targeting OT until they have entered it. Grid technology is still immature. Many vulnerabilities exist both in legacy grid systems and innovative smart grid solutions. And intelligence services do not share threat intelligence with grid operators. Detection capabilities for ICS are still immature. A lot of effort was put into state-of-the-art technology, but it was never tested. Processes and knowledge to use technology are still missing. So what this means is that we are relatively blind from the defense side. What do we defend against? So besides this relative blindness, also responsibilities to deal with nation-state level acts are not cleared. Grid operators do not assume responsibility because they can never match skills, budget, and means of a nation-state.
Military cyber defense organizations do not assume responsibility because they do not have knowledge and skills of grid technology and operations. Also, they cannot really interfere with companies in peacetime. And governmental cybersecurity organizations and intelligence agencies do assume responsibility. But what can they do and how? This is not resolved yet, and so we need to define clear answers here. So for ENCS, what do we contribute on improving threat intelligence and preparedness? In the area of information sharing and community building, ENCS has created and runs a security operations center analyst community amongst her members, and security roundtables to share sensitive information in trusted groups cross borders and to improve visibility of threats by creating a process overlay on individual detection solutions of grid operators. In education and training, ENCS provides red team, blue team training on real OT networks and dedicated security operations and security architecture training to grid operators. ENCS is working with industry to improve detection technology in a security operations program by testing and evaluating OT sensor technologies in close collaboration with vendors. The focus should now be on improving knowledge and skills of the SOC analysts to be able to react. They are not ready to detect or respond to attacks. They need to practice, but it is not possible in real environments because incidents are so rare. So we must invest much more in exercises like red team, blue team training exercises like now being developed in Horizon 2020 E4 project, and response trainings with grid operators. Enhanced efforts in skills development and exercises throughout the stakeholders community are critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Anios. How about you, Aurelio?
Okay, so thank you first of all for the invitation and good morning to everyone. And complementing what Anios just said and what we heard in the first panel this morning, what we assist as an association was to an increase of attacks during this period. We saw that most of the attacks were ransomware attacks. As we heard this morning, there was the energy system is now in a spotlight, even stronger than it was before. And we can talk about a kind of weaponization of the energy sector. And we, as we heard from the previous speakers, we assist to a kind of mobilization of activists. So we have some well-coordinated groups as well as voluntary mobilization of activists taking his party on this war, which makes the future even more uncertain than before. This morning, Ron said that it was always difficult to predict. My grandfather used to say that it's very difficult to make predictions, namely about the future, and we are in that situation. So predictions are even more difficult, which means that we felt that we need to increase our preparation. The good things and about preparation, and is already talk about the portfolio of measures that we can take and we should take. But looking from our perspective, what we saw, thanks to this uncertainty, was a closer cooperation between our members. And if alone we don't know enough to overcome the uncertainty, if we work close and if we work closely together, we can have a better risk assessment or even build a better threat landscape. So the first point we felt from this situation was the increase in cooperation. And this increase of cooperation also translates an increase into the maturity level of the organizations. Because when we talk about cybersecurity, what we assist for the last couple of years was to an increasing level of maturity, in the sense that it was not so difficult a couple of years ago to change information about technology. It was usual to see the CSIRTs changing information about very detailed technological issues related with incidents, but no big information about the operational side of the incident. What was wrong, what was bad, not in terms of technology, but in terms of human behavior, in terms of processes, in terms of things that didn't run so well. And this new situation was a little bit scaring and increased not only the cooperation, but the kind of cooperation we were able to assist among our members. It was easier than ever, and it was not for the right reasons, but it was easier to assist to this exchange of this information sharing, focused on the operation side of the cybersecurity, not only the technological side of the cybersecurity. Secondly, we realized that we need to reinforce our threat intelligence analysis. As we heard also in the first panel, we are used to exchange data, but we need to exchange information, which means, and we felt that in our own association, we need to reinforce, and we made a call for action to our members, to reinforce our threat intelligence working group. So by now we have a very useful and powerful tool, developed and founded by the Commission, the MISP platform, which is quite good for exchange information on malware. But we need to work on data to provide threat information. And this calls for skills, for knowledge, and for time. And the third main point we realized for this couple of months, for these 8 months, is that the lack of skills and talented staff that we start feeling from the early beginning of the digital transformation in our sector, that became higher when we entered into the pandemic in 2020, is now even stronger. So our members face this lack of talent, this lack of qualified staff that would be able to release some of their time to these common threat intelligence analysis. And this is a challenge for the sector, is a challenge for our association also. In order to minimize this, what we discussed and we are trying to do is to use this MISP platform that is in place since last June, now is hosted by ENISA, and is used by most of the European ISACs, and our Energy European ISAC is using the platform, is to make it being part of the daily processes of our members. So not use the MISP as another task inside of the work, of the daily work of our security operators from our members, but as a common task of their daily business, which means that in the lack of resources, we can increase the usage of a so powerful tool without overcharging the staff that our members have by now. So, making the story short, we felt an increase in cooperation, a different kind of cooperation, a more operational side cooperation. We felt the need to increase the threat intel analysis and this lack of skills and the qualified staff.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for mentioning MISP. We'll have some time later to discuss it when we will talk about information sharing. But right now, I would like to stay a little while in Ukraine, and I would like to ask you. As you mentioned, we have 2015 Black Energy, 2016 crash override, then Petya, not Petya, now Russian aggression, Russian war, everything in Ukraine. Is there something what we can learn from this status, from these viruses and war? Is there something what we can bring to the European Union, to the European TSOs, and what we can put in place? What do you think, Grzegorz?
I would say that we did it after 2015. Already in 2016, when I visited some conferences and some gremia, some people in Europe, everybody was very much concerned about first blackout happened by hackers in Ukraine. In 2016, there was little industrial one called crash override in Ukraine, directed to the different operator and using this modular software, this destroyer. So it started the work, and many European companies, not only distributors and transmission operators, but also different institutes and consulting companies started to think about it and start to prepare strategies. And in my opinion, in many cases, work is done because there was, let's say, it was analyzed. It was found what were the weaknesses and what were the vectors and how to protect the systems against those kind of attacks. And most of the companies succeeded in protecting that. Of course, there are very simple and obvious strategies. First of all, isolate internal resources, company resources from outside world, better protected, better filtrate, better analyze, use better tools for malware protection. Second, divide your network area or IT area in segments, in zones, and protect those zones on a certain level, appreciate level. And if you do it, the same banks do it, in fact, the same method they use to protect data. We do protect the controls. So that is a little bit different way and different protocols, different traffic, but the same is to be done. But it is very, very costly. That is again true, and the companies do invest money in that. And that is the difference, because in my opinion, the energy sector did the work starting 2015, and now it is better protected than before against that kind of attack on infrastructure. But many public companies in different sectors didn't do it because they hadn't so much stressed. They weren't so much stressed, and of course, the impact is different because attacking the connected energy sector, electro-energy sector in Europe, which is fully synchronized now from Ukraine to Portugal, even to Morocco and Algeria, as a one system, attacking successful attack to one point can disturb or make a malfunction of big part of the civilization in Europe. So that is the different impact. So in fact, and what Putin is doing now, he is attacking mainly attacking the energy sector and electro energy infrastructure. He's bombing, but also at the same time he's attacking using hacker attacks, DDoSes, and so on. So they have a really tough time because it is combined now. And what is the lesson to us? Just think about combined attacks, combined situations, because catastrophe is always combined. It's not one reason why we have the disaster. It's always some vectors happened at the same time. For example, this winter is a little bit tough to energy sector because due to changes in the market prices and production capabilities, energy production capabilities, this might be tight on energy in some moments when there is low temperature and no wind in Europe. So these moments are we are weaker than ever and more, let's say, how to say, weak to additional cyber attacks, for example. Because when things are on the border, it's easy to break.
Yeah, if I may react to that, is that I mean the scenario that was mentioned a few times in this in the sessions also before is the attack on Ukraine, the destroyer, and this was something that we took notice. Yes, this can happen. How should we prepare against it? But the assumption has been it will not happen to us. You know, and this has changed because now we have seen it can happen to us, and actually there have been attacks. The software is weaponized. The skills that they have in those groups are extremely high, and so I think the lessons from what has been going on there, to me, mean that the reality that something could happen to us has increased significantly. And what exactly could happen and how it could happen, yes, we know about the past and the incidents that happened, but if I take, for example, the ENTSO-E malware, for the attack that happened back in 2016, this was a very, let's say, modular tool that was capable to do different things in substations. If we now look in the ENTSO-E 2 that was recently found, there had been further development in the tool, but only one piece was, let's say, implemented and executed, but it doesn't tell about the other parts. And you can be quite sure that things evolved there as well. We heard the example of the pipe dream, which is quite frightening. And I think that, you know, from the lessons learned, we've been gradually implementing in the grids how to prepare for it, with different speeds, I think, in different approaches, because it differs per land. But to, let's say, also anticipate that, you know, the attack will change. And now it has been from the SCADA into the substations, and so by segregation, you can resolve it. We know how to do it. It takes quite some time and effort to implement, but still we know. But when they go into the substation, into the embedded systems, then it becomes much more difficult. And, you know, those are the things that also become, you know, possible. And so therefore, in terms of understanding what is going on at the malicious groups, what we find about the softwares, and to share that type information with the people with the real knowledge, is something that we're still lacking too much, actually. And so this is what I think, where we really should focus, where we need to build on the skill sets, also to be able to identify. I discussed the monitoring solutions. There are monitoring solutions, but what do you get from it? Do we have the people who now know how to operate, and we can discuss MISP, you know, and we have a tool, but what are you going to put into this tool, and what is the information that you require? Do we understand the use cases well enough? So this is where we have to do still a lot, and where we have to put a lot of priority, I think.
I would like to add something to Anius. I got some information recently that Russian groups are now offering, of course, in darknet, quite a huge money for selling them exploits or found backdoors or whatever from the market, let's say. So they notice that we are quite well protected. So they search, they look for additional techniques, additional 0 days, and so on, and they pay money for that now. So that is something new, because that shows that they have the increased activity, and they are speeding up. Let's say
and they invest in it.
Investing in it.
So
yeah?
they give it priority.
So that is what is the additional threat now and risk.
Maybe if I can join the discussion. You talked about the Industrial and the event in 2015 and 16, and which is very targeted to the grid, and indeed the worst incident we have been facing for grid operator. But we had also we learned also one thing in 2017 with NotPetya. It's that even if it's an attack targeting one country or several companies and administration, it can spill over all around the world. And because NotPetya has got a dramatic impact on all companies of any kind of nation, any business. And I think for us it's also a lesson that in 2022, when the crisis started, so we prepared for every kind of surprise. So we had to review all our processes, to accelerate our protection, our surveillance, our monitoring, our resilience also mechanisms. One example that made us that triggered a reflection is it is based on our emergency network mechanism. For example, using satellite connection as an alternative way, or fiber connection. We've seen that this year satellites could be also hacked and the connection blocked. We've seen also that the fibers down the sea, in the oceans, could be also aggressed and cut, and it would. So there is a global resilience of the systems of internet, but we are now in a situation we have to take into account the fact that no specific kind of technology, communication technology, is sure and protected from a cyber attack. That's something we have to learn about.
One more about these offerings. I heard that there is one offer for let's say exploit for charging stations for cars, because it is very, very attractive. You know it, because you did tested that a few years ago. And you're absolutely right, because it is a very good vector.
Nevertheless, I would like to stress something that was already said. 2015, when Ukraine was hacked for the first time, it was a turning point for cybersecurity for the rest of the companies in Europe. Until then, some of the European utilities were aware of the cybersecurity issue, and they started taking some measures. But it was more, from my perspective, and I used it to be responsible for the cybersecurity of the Portuguese distribution company. It was more a matter of faith than a matter of believing that this could happen to ourselves. And in 2015, our worst case scenarios, that was an attack that could lead to a blackout, came to a reality. And everyone in Europe was aware that it was something that could happen to ourselves. And since then, it was able or easier to get the investments that we need to improve our technical infrastructure, to start training our people. Of course, that we face this lack of skills and this lack of qualified staff. But nevertheless, 2015, with the first Ukraine attack, the first attack to Ukraine, it was a critical turning point on the cybersecurity in Europe, namely for utilities. Nevertheless, now we face two main challenges. One is related with the supply chain. And I remember one incident that we have this year related with solar wind. And the malware was not put directly into the main software, but the hackers were able to get into the contractor that was working on updates of the main software, and the company was used to release software updates in a very regular basis. And one of those updates was hacked, and the malware was in the updates, which means that once the update ran in the software, that was something that companies were used and rely on to do. They had a backdoor that was open for the hackers, and which means that if we were already concerned to have security measures within our supply chain, namely when we had the subcontractors to perform more skilled and specific activities in our critical systems, now we must be even more aware, because our trusted suppliers have their own sub-suppliers that must be more robust in terms of their own vulnerabilities. And this is a quite big challenge. The second one is that cooperation, and you talked that most probably you will want to come to the topic. Cooperation is a must, but is never enough. And when I look to the European Energy ISAC, and we talk about cooperation between utilities, we have about 50 partners, from which we have 30 and some members. But we need to find a way to grow the ISAC. Otherwise, the sharing of information will still be sharing information between a small group when compared with the broad Europe utilities, energy utilities industry. And this means that we are more aware than ever to change information. We are able to do that, but we are not so aware of the need of sharing knowledge. And this is the role that we try to do, and this is something that we need to work at the European level to improve the number of companies that are able and open to deeply share their own knowledge, their own information, in order to build a more complete threat landscape in Europe.
I think maybe we need to share knowledge, of course, but we need also to know precisely with whom we share knowledge. And you mentioned the subcontractors example. I think one of the first action we took at E.DSO when the conflict started, as we were quite anxious, it was kind of review of with whom are we working? Are there Russian companies in our subcontractors or direct contractors? Are there Russian software for antivirus, for example? This review, when you got hundreds and hundreds of contractors and subcontractors, it's important, necessary, because, for example, in the ISAC, you have a lot of members, but are you sure? Have you checked that among those members you got people from one side and not both sides? Because in this case, information sharing can also be useful for the adverse opponents. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is the basic principle of an association like ours. We need to have a trusted community. To have a trusted community, you need to know each other. And if you know each other, you need to build not only the trustness, but we need to rely on each other. And so, besides, of course, the terms of reference and the personal commitment, there is something that is quite valuable when we are working within an association like the ISAC or ANCS. You know every member one by one and face by face, and you speak with them eyes in the eyes. And this means that you are able to build trust based, of course, also in relationships. Besides the professional commitment and the company engagement, you have this personal trustness between members, which means that you know when you want to share something, or if you want to ask something, you know exactly to whom you can call, because you are going to speak with a trustable person from a trustable company. Not because the world knows the company, but because this specific community knows quite well the company and the person. So this is
two things. One, supply chain, very important topic, very high risk, very difficult to deal with. And certainly the solution lies in hands of Europe, in European Commission. It is really required because in public tenders we are doing in hardware even, not only in software. You are finding offers of different new companies which are rebranded or hidden sponsors and so on. And there is no law in Europe to protect against these practices. We need a strong European law which allows to control security of the tenders in that way. That is quite important, and it should be equal across the Europe, because local solutions are very strange sometimes. And second thing is that this information exchange, it's always that problem for many years that everybody, even in very well, as you say, very well structured, very well built relations between companies, between parties, that everybody understands, everybody agrees to exchange the information. Sometimes there are limitations by the law, by the way, on that. But even if there are not, happens sometimes that, again, they have an attack, they have losses, they don't, let's say, share information about that, and they disclose it after half year. After half year, it's nothing, it's not worth.
No, and I agree. I mean, but also for the information sharing, it's a rather complicated topic, and it was mentioned before, also in the first panel, that we also have to rethink the approach, and it's something that we've been advocating already for a long time in ENCS, because for the sharing of information and doing testing, we know a lot about systems, we know a lot about vulnerabilities. We know about organizations deploying the technology, and in many cases we're just not allowed to share because there are legal constraints if it's between the one nation state and the other, and then there are also legal constraints, and yet we need to overcome that. And I think in the regulatory process, in the network code, and in the NIS and in the Cyber Resilience Act, those are topics that are on the table, and I think you know, it's extremely important that, let's say, based on those topics that we, well, sort of get organized. And indeed, I mean, you require trusted groups. If you enforce, and you have to, then you have a risk, you know, that there is data shared, but is it the information that you require? And so what will be kept out of the loop? You know, so I think it's the trusted part is very important, but it's also very complex, and you need different, let's say, settings and topics to be able to do it right. And so this is not at all easy. It's extremely important, because also what I referred to earlier, that we kind of blind. Well, you can, you know, improve your site if you become effective in how you can better share this information, but also to have a better capability of analysis and to determine, let's say, the mitigation that you require on top of it. And so those topics, I believe, are really important, but also it requires a very high level of expertise. And this is the problem that I'm seeing at the moment, is that also from the regulations, there is a lot of effort required to put into, let's say, all kind of cybersecurity related things, whereas the skilled people who, let's say, have the capability to do it are just not there. And in ENCS, we've been building expertise in an expert pool during the last 10 years, and it takes time, it's complicated, and indeed for the people active in this domain, there are many challenges, there are many opportunities. But I mean, if you then say, okay, we need to do this and this and this, it requires this capacity, then also we have to think how we level up, really level up the skill levels. And if I look around, you know, in my daily practice, even, you know, the people with a good knowledge of the grid, who understand the implications of digitization, there is a whole generation kind of retiring. There is a new generation coming, you know, with a different mindset, and certainly not yet, let's say, the experience to get it right. And this is something I believe where we really need to do more and better, because in the last 10 years, I'm still working mainly with the same people with the real expertise, and there has not been a significant growth in it. And I think this is absolutely required that we make that happen.
Yeah, I can add that we need, I totally agree with Anius, we need to do more, we need to do better, and I strongly believe that to achieve that, we need to do it together. Because, and we discussed this inside the NCS a couple of years ago, inside our members' organizations, we are lacking of skills. However, if we are 12 companies, and with each one of us is able to dedicate 1 hour to threat intelligence analysis, it means that together we have 2 hours, 12 hours of human equivalent time to dedicate in threat analysis. And since threat analysis most of the times are common in common companies in the same sector, this means that we can increase by a lot the knowledge we have, even mitigating a little bit the scarcity of talent resources that we are really facing. So do more, do better, and do it together. Otherwise, we won't achieve our goal, and we will fail.
Yes, and one way to do it together is not only on training. As you said, training is important. We lack OT specialists, we lack OT cyber specialists, but not only training, but also exercising. And this is, I think, a challenge, you know, to make it possible to create a big scale exercise between gathering lots of key players among the grid operators.
Absolutely, very much so. And this is almost a frustration that we have inside ENCS, because we have been addressing this topic, this precise topic, years ago, and we have worked out, let's say, Horizon 2020 proposals, how we could get it going. And it's very difficult to get the right traction because it requires a strong investment, and you cannot allocate one party to say, okay, now you provide the money. So you have to go through the funding processes, and then you're just dependent on what are the other offers and whether or not you get it granted. Luckily now, I mean, we can make a step there with the project that was now granted, the EFORT project, but it's late. It's too late, and it's not too late, but it's late, and it's relatively little because indeed we require more. You can say the training, and we have now education programs also for CISOs and everything. But that helps, but it's certainly not enough because for all the people studying informatics, learning to write software, in all those curricula, is there a component saying how do I write secure software? I doubt it. And then when it comes to the capabilities inside a company, so what is it in your role that you have to know? What is it that you have to be capable of doing in a situation that there is an incident and many other things? Do we know what it is? And do we have the appropriate training for it? And I think we have done we have made important steps there, but this is where we can and have to still improve a lot, I think.
Yes. I would come back for a moment what was a little bit mentioned about, let's say, telecommunication cables under the sea. Yeah? It's not only telecommunication cables under the sea, it's also power cables under the sea. It's also pipes, as we know, gas pipes. And that is also the matter what happens in Ukraine when they are bombing the substations. So, okay, that might be not a bombing by the rocket, but it just might happen somewhere in Europe, some explosion at the substation suddenly, at a critical substation. And what then happens? It's not maybe only cyber, but it's usually somehow connected. What then happens? Then we have the double effect, because we don't only lose the power capabilities and power connections and possibility of transmitting energy, but also we are losing telecommunication connections. So different media should be network of different media should not be connected in one piece. They should be distributed because the risk should be distributed, and that is the lesson learned again from Ukraine and looking at this problem with underwater cables as well.
Thank you very much, Gregor. To sum up, we can see there are three main things as I heard it last minute. So there is supply chain, there is information sharing, and there is education and training exercise and everything what is mentioned together. We have last 10 minutes now, so we have some questions from Slido. What new ways do you have in mind to develop, train the scarce energy cybersecurity workforce? Maybe Anius.
Yeah, I can react on that question. Thank you for the question, by the way. I think, what's needed is that, like I said, that from the various roles in a grid operator organization, so the people who are managing the assets, to identify, let's say, what the risks are they have to deal with, that they to look into the knowledge that they require to be able to recognize if there is anything going on, that if they detect something that they know what are the follow-up steps that we need to do, and that has to be analyzed, and actually we've done that inside ENCS, to have for the various roles in the organization to identify what is the knowledge level, what is the skills level required for those roles. We've made a mapping to see what for security, education and training is available, and thus that fulfill the needs that we have. And if you do this, you see that there are gaps, important gaps, that we from ENCS started to address, and so to create let's say training materials for it. Like I already mentioned, the security operations training, the security architecture training, And so this is, I think, where the real need is to have this knowledge and to be operational. This is where the focus needs to be. And so I think this is something that can be done in a more structural way. I mean, we do it now inside our membership. We advocate that these capabilities exist. But I think that many parties and people in the working field do not even know about it. And so this is something also when it comes to information sharing and helping where we, again, can do a lot better because there is more, let's say, existent than many people are aware of. And so I think, yeah, it's also a request to the larger community present here to really also, let's say, inform yourself about, the things that are available. And, the specific groups dealing with the topics, approach them, ask them how they can help.
We'll talk.
Yes, and I like the comment that was posted about the dividing the generations between new and older generations, the older that know what's OT, what's a blackout, how to deal with, and the new generation that are more fond of cyber and high tech.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing, because you see, let's say, in the people, let's say the people more mature who have, let's say, the background and the knowledge about the system at the one side, and then at the other side, the new technology coming in, and then with the specific challenges, because even if you think about innovations and there's new smart grid systems, and then you think, okay, probably they gave a good thought about security, supply chain issue question comes up again. And in many cases, it's not the case, because then you have this brilliant ideas, startup, so they create a product, bring it to the market, get the investment, need to earn back, let's say, the money, so they require, let's say, a fast rollout to sell much. And in that space, there is very seldomly room to have security expertise as part of it. And when you start to look into those systems, we had the example of the solar panel, but if you go into other systems like, the panels for residential use and innovative stuff, and you look into the security, you can find lots of, bad things. And so this is another part where you kind of also in this type of companies, it's also an education thing, but also that there will be incentive that they, invest in security.
And besides, we cannot forget that besides learning and besides skills, we have in the early beginning human behavior. And as Jean-François was saying, phishing is still a way to get into our systems. And the human must be the first firewall in our companies, the first defense that we can have in our companies, realize in each one of us. So human behavior is something that we need to work and go slightly deeper than we are used to do.
There is one sentence there which I would like to read. Regarding the usage of cloud in energy crisis management, it is reliable as the relevant networks are powered. Here, the reality in practice is not as bright as it seems, and I agree with that 100%. And so, the TSOs have usually the strategy to keep all the systems out of the cloud, inside, and self-powered, because they have to sustain, and that's it.
Yeah, right. Perfect. Thank you very much, Grzegorz. I think that was the nice end of our discussion. We could sit here 1 hour more, and still we'll have new theme to discussion. But I can see now Gianluca Gardelli here on the left side, and he will bring us the presentation about Ukraine, and we'll continue to our panel. So, gentlemen, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
And thank you, absolutely, Ivan Štefek, for this moderation. Very interesting panel, and thank you, everybody of you. And now is up to Gianluca Guidarelli. Gianluca is a principal engineer infrastructure at the Swiss Grid, and is also, and even more, if I could say that, the Ukraine Synchronization Task Force leader for ENTSO-E. So Gianluca managed the complexity of synchronizing the Ukrainian system with the Western European a few months back, and it was a success then, and I will say that it is an ongoing success anyway. Gianluca, the floor is yours, and thank you very much again to the panel. You can discreetly go back to your places in this way. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Thank you. Okay, so I managed only the IT part, not all the synchronization, but thanks for that. Okay, so then I would like to make a bit of background. The background is that we was alerted that on end of February, Ukraine made an isolation test of their grid. And after they haven't decided to don't join anymore the Russian energy grid, and they request an emergency synchronization to ENTSO-E in order to be capable to provide the reliability of their system. So ENTSO-E reacted with the formation of a task force to understand the feasibility of this task and to understand what was possible to do and the time to implement this synchronization. And we was supporting the task force with the IT part that was mainly related to create the connection to the of the system and the providing the measure from the Ukrainian system, and as well to understand the cybersecurity side, to understand what risk can bring this connection to our system. So after 6 days, we was able to provide the minimal communication and the minimal measure support in order to provide the synchronization was happening more or less 2 weeks after the request. And then we supported for the other 2 months for the other points was related to improve till to have market exchange with Ukraine. So then afterwards we was surprised about the speed. We was able to react to this request, and we tried to understand what was the key factor that was enabling our success in such short time. And I made this short summary. Basically, the first one is basically the good luck, because this is always needed when you have a challenge like this, because you can never predict what are the situations you may face. The second was skill and resources. This other component is really important, but is possible only if you need exactly what you need to do, what you need to have. And the third one is the main one, is the preparation. So, and preparation was the part we was able to control, and basically this was our biggest success, biggest part. So, going toward the second slide, basically what was possible to do and why we was able to do this. So basically this story is very long, start from 2015. In 2015, basically ENTSO-E discovered that the network supporting the communication between the TSO was a bit outdated. The new challenges was not capable to support. Basically, we decided to form a strategy project, was able to map all the new requirements and define the evolution of the infrastructure was needed to be implemented. And this, at the conclusion of this block, this project, then we made another part with the selection option that was to basically create a common infrastructure for all the TSO communication infrastructure. And we made a H-atom risk assessment. Basically was a risk assessment study to understand what was the risk related to the solution we selected. Then we defined the topology of this solution. And then we made another part because we understood one challenge we have in front of us was, for example, to have network code on emergency restoration compliancy. So we also made one other study, was called a space grid, to understand in case of emergency, in this emergency scenario, how we can commit the requirements. And this was, for example, related this study, the use of satellite technologies to support voice and emergency data communication in case of basically emergency scenario. Then we went for a rollout. Basically, we implemented the rollout of the full solution we identified in the study. Then the problem we understood, okay, if we have infrastructure and we need also some legal support in order to commit the decision within among all the TSO involved. And then we make a target, we develop a target operating model in order to agree across the ENTSO-E committee how the governance for this new infrastructure should be made. And then we set up an MLA, and basically this multilateral agreement was related to how to implement the services and the decision related to this common infrastructure. And then actually we are implementation with the last step, that is the PCN out of band, that is basically the project to implement the requirement identified in the space grid study, so the satellite communication stuff. So we have at the moment a physical infrastructure, and we are deploying now the emergency communication over satellite. So going to the next slide, basically what are the key enabling pillar we had from this 6-7 year of work? Basically, we have an infrastructure, it's called a PCN, that is basically a private MPLS provider among all the TSO that is providing basis or communication capabilities, can be easily extended to other party or other needs in a short time. Then we have the communication network MLA. This MLA is basically the legal definition about the usage of this network, how for example, who is appointed to do what, and how this service is regulated. Then we have a service operator appointed to supervise the network operation, the cybersecurity of the network, and whatever. And then we have now in deployment the space grid study, that is basically the satellite protection of this network in case for emergency situation. So this block was fundamental in order to enable the Ukraine synchronization, because basically the communication, private communication toward Ukraine was mapped directly over the MPLS backbone in a short time. And the first communication enabled was over satellite, and we was knowing exactly the scenario to implement, because we already have a study ready. So we was able to implement the satellite connection in the matter of 48 hours from the moment we was alerted about this part. The rest of the communication take about 6 days to implement 2 ground line and to map it into MPLS backbone. Then we was having already the scenario to implement, for example, the DMZ related and the segregation of service, because obviously we cannot allow a direct communication from outside to the backbone. And basically, we was able also to map this new requirement in a service through a decision, because we was having the MLA allowing us to take decision and giving a clear statement about the governance and the decision power of each body involved. So at the end, the TSO saw 6 days to implement, but what I see is 6 years of preparation before was allowing us to have the capability to react in such time for this part. So the task force was split in 3 phases. The phase number 1 was the minimal, so give the visibility. So basically we was having only to have the basic capability of data exchange was made by 2 ground line plus 1 satellite backup link. Then we also had to implement a converter, SCADA converter, to be implemented in the in a DMZ in order to have indirect communication with the other TSO. Task force, the phase number 2 was related to implement the VAMS visibility. So the expert on stability want to see basically the stability of the connection, and then we have to allow to have a PMU data exchange, obviously always with the DMZ and separation of the communication. And then the point number 3 was the exchange of the measure related to market in order to allow trading of energy from Ukraine. So the phase number 1 was the one I said before, was 6 days, more or less. The phase number 2 was taking about 2 weeks because we have to implement also the VAMS gateway and whatever. And the phase number 3 was taking something more because was not clear at the first moment which kind of measure have to be transferred and which was the target of the measure. So basically, this is more or less what's going on. And just to giving to the summary, and basically the first key enabling factor to have this part was the presence of an infrastructure. And the infrastructure was allowing us to basically implement the extension of the connection toward Ukraine in a short time and in easy way. The second building block that is very relevant is the legal framework. So the presence of a legal framework basically allow us to bind this new service in a legally binded in a definition that was agreed among all the parties that was involved in the infrastructure deployment. The third part is very, very important, is basically the service provider. Presence of service provider was already pre-appointed and was working together in order to provide this service, was allowing us to commit immediately the delivery of this service, and also to have someone that the day after this synchronization was able to operate the service with the SLA and monitoring what is going on in this part. And then the presence or already made emergency scenarios is also giving us the an assessment of what can be done and what should be done to support this emergency scenario. So just to give a summary, the work for all these deliverable was starting in 2015, and basically what we have at the moment is that this emergency scenario was not defined for a war situation, but actually was very similar, can be reused easily in order to deliver this part. And as well, the MLA was, for example, was concluded on the end of 2021. So basically, we was very, very lucky that all this capability was ready, because this can is one of the first use case where we can use this new capability we developed, and basically this is the result of multiple years of collaboration. So as a summary, I will say that the Ukrainization synchronization task force is the result of multiple years of collaboration among all the TSOs that allow us to basically give these new performance, this new capability, and also this situation like this was already seen a long time ago, and we took a lot of time. So what I'm telling before, if we go back to the slide number 1. So going back, so basically the good luck, what was the good luck we had? The good luck is that luckily when we defined the implementation scenario, we found that the machine was available, because as everyone know, at the moment there is a bit of delay in the delivery of the hardware components, and we was lucky that all the component we need was available. The other lucky was that I have to admit that the colleague from Ukrenergo was really good prepared, and the skill was very good, and we was fast in implementing this stuff. The second point, the skill resources. The skill resources was available because we was already working for 7 years. We had the time to have a budgeting process. We have also to form the people or to recruit the people needed to perform this kind of job. And this is the result of the third block that is our key success, that is the preparation. So at the end, we had an emergency situation. No one can foresee this situation, but at the end, everything was prepared. Not for this scenario, but we was having a baseline of preparation to react to emergency situation. And basically, this is a result of working together between all the TSOs, and we understood that putting together the skilled competence and to work together, we can enable this kind of capability. And obviously, this is not the end. So we have to continuously reassess our capability, our scenario in order to be prepared to the next challenge.
Thank you, Gianluca. And we have some minutes for some questions. And while somebody, those interested that I see among the public reflect on a question probably from from the colleague of Enedis and from Anjos, and it could be a couple of good questions to you. I've got one, especially, and it relates to the last thing that you say, that you continue to monitor, etc. This kind of sentinel job is performed by who, with what means, and with what degree of, let's say, reporting and early alarm?
Okay, so just to the new structure of ENTSO-E. So ENTSO-E decided last year to adopt a committee dedicated to ICTC. So basically to monitor specifically the IT part. And there is a steering group that's called a strategy, and the steering group strategy should basically look about the business requirement and map it to IT capabilities and IT skills that will be required. So before, when we talk about 2015, this was a task from a system operation committee, and this one was basically one group. There was an IT steering group under the SOC. But at the moment, with the new ICTC committee, I understood that also ENTSO-E understood this lesson learned and is basically developing a proper committee to address cybersecurity and IT stuff.
And without exceeding your mandate, how did react the structure in Ukraine under these stressful circumstances?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yes, what was the reaction from your colleagues in Ukraine? What kind of cooperation could you experience even in times of war?
Yeah, I say that I'm impressed about their resiliency, because we had in the last few months multiple situations where there was a very hard situation to challenge, especially a couple of weeks ago. But I will say that until now, the reaction of this guy is really impressive. And I will say that every time that there is a relevant information, we got alert. And the stability of the system, considering the actual situation where they are, is incredibly stable. So I will say that they are doing a good job. And but we never to be relaxed on this stuff, because the situation is in evolution, as you said. Yep. And we have also to see the new requirement that will come up, because at the moment we set up a situation that is temporary, but in the future I understood that we need to look about new requirements, and we have to keep monitoring the situation and assess with the colleagues what new system we need to do.
Thank you. Stay there. Don't move. Jean-François, can you, do you have maybe a question for Gianluca? if you could move to the table, and you position yourself on the cross on the floor. There it is.
Thank you very much. Well, one of the important protection measures is isolation. I mean, either whether it be from the physical balancing of the interconnected grid, or from the point of view of a cyber attack. How did you approach this double and tricky question with your Ukrainian colleagues?
Okay, so obviously we have to consider at the moment the connection from Ukraine as a not secure connection, because at the moment there is a war in progress and we never know who is on the other side. It can be that the situation can change from one day to the other. So at the moment they are implementing their protection. They are making a lot of, they're investing a lot of resources in cyber protection for themselves. But for us, we always consider that the connection can be unsecure from one moment to the other, due to the change scenario on the other side. So what we did, we considered that the connection is by definition untrusted. And then what we made, we haven't allowed to access our network, telecommunication network directly. We implemented DMZ. We implemented some cyber measure considered by firewalls, anti-malware, advanced anti-malware, whatever. And no connection is allowed to go directly from Ukrainian side to TSO side. There is always an application proxy. And we are monitoring the situation. Obviously, we have to consider that the cyber risk is there, but one of the stuff is also the integrity of the measure we receive. But for this, we have no, at the moment, big, what we are monitoring basically the possibility to identify pattern of attack to our network, and we try to stop. So we have a limited risk for an exposition to on a DMZ that in any case is not directly connected to the rest of the system. This is what we did, and this was the only way to do in order to get this connection in time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-François. Sorry for having taken you a little bit off balance, but the language of science doesn't work in this simul broadcasting setting. So I've got a last question.
Yeah.
There was a moment, even if you had a good luck, as you stated, that you were afraid that all of this could not happen. And to what was it due?
Well, I try to explain the concern. I was in my career involved in the synchronization from other TSOs in the past, and I understood that normally the normal time is between 7-8 months and 1 year. This is the normal experience. Obviously, it was an emergency synchronization, was not something planned, and I was really afraid about the possibility to implement a connection without using internet in such short time. And until we haven't had the confirmation that the design, all the system required for the design we made was available, and also to assess the skill from the Ukrainian colleague, I was a bit skeptical, to be honest. But you know, we was engaged with a very, very high level pressure, and then we committed our effort to do this stuff, and yeah, at the end it was possible. But to be honest, I was a bit skeptical about timeline, because I understood that the expectation was to have within 1 month, and this was, but at the end it works. So.
I see on our screen here from Slido a short but tricky question coming from a colleague of air grid in Ireland. What are the 3 risks that the TSOs and the DSO face in this context? You can leave the DSO apart because we know exactly what it means.
Well, as I said before, so it depends if you mean from IT perspective or
the IT perspective.
Well, so the problem is that we are trying to have a system that is stable as much as possible. Obviously, the first risk that we may face is that we will have a connected grid and we will have no measure from the other. So DDoS is the first risk that I see in front of us, and this is really with a high probability. But I understood that on the grid colleagues also have some countermeasure to face this situation. For what concern the cyber risk, I understood that our colleague that was involved in the cyber designed something that can detect this part, and we try to limit, we limited until now the measure to the minimal to reduce as much as the risk for TSO. Obviously, the risk is not 0 because we cannot say the risk is 0, but I would say that we reduce to acceptable. So I will say that the most risk that we have in front of us is that we have a connected grid and we will have no measure from the counterpart. This is really acceptable, and we hope that for all the rest we are able to handle in a safe way this kind of the other situation.
Thank you very much, Gianluca. And it was very, very much clear what you said, and I am sure that online and here in this room, many took notes on your indications, and learning from your experiences is certainly one of the takeaway of this meeting today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are couple of minutes ahead of schedule, I believe 5-6 minutes ahead of schedule, but we cut it here. And for the some 150 people online, we shall be back at 1400 hour sharp. And for the other participants here, there is a lunch served here outside. Please enjoy, and thank you very much for coming back again. You too. Thank you.